Hey folks, Christina here, and this video will walk us through the chapter on government regulation, which is chapter 10 of your OpenStax textbook. All right, so let's jump in. And the first topic in our text is administrative law. And this is in section 10.1. There's a little bit of terminology that you want to make sure you know. Administrative law is basically law that is related to administrative agencies. Sometimes this is called regulatory or public law. Also, there's a term called organic statute, which is simply a law written by Congress that lays out the purpose and structure of a governmental agency. And so these organic statutes are used to create administrative agencies, define their responsibilities, and define their authority. Now, we all remember from our history class that back in the 1800s, everybody was agrarian. We lived on farms, we had small communities, but as the 20th century came, industrialization came. And what happened was more people were packing into cities, and the number of governmental agencies quickly expanded. And our text says the reason for this is the US government saw a quote, need to expand its regulation to protect and support the public. And so they came up with lots of agencies. A few of them you probably know, the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration. That agency regulates food and medicine in our country. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they regulate trade. The FRS, the Federal Reserve System, they regulate the banking industry. You probably also know the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. So there's several agencies that you're very likely familiar with. We're going to also talk about regulatory agencies, and let's take a look at that. That's in section 10.2 of your book. So the power of these regulatory agencies comes from the executive branch of the government. The government, however, is not able to carry out the work of these agencies. So an agency is created. Congress actually passes laws to carry out the directives, and it gives the power to the agency to fulfill its duty. So the power comes from the executive branch. Congress creates the agency. There's a little bit of differentiation here that's not in your text, but there are administrative agencies and regulatory agencies, and they're really, really close. But an administrative agency, their purpose is it's a government body within the executive branch generally. It's designed to administer, manage, and implement specific laws passed by Congress, like the Social Security Administration or the Department of Education. Now, the function of an administrative agency is they're managing public services, distributing benefits, and managing governmental functions. A regulatory agency, though, is a specialized type of administrative agency that's tasked with establishing and enforcing safety, fairness, and or operational rules for specific industries or aspects of society. And some of the examples are like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. So your text doesn't exactly make that differentiation clear, so I wanted to point that out for you all. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the agency structure. So the agencies are made up of experts. They're trusted by Congress to identify the structure that best meets their goal. This means each of the agencies is likely structured a little bit differently. We're going to look at the FTC, it's the one our text looks at here. This is a well-known agency, the Federal Trade Commission, and it's organized into bureaus. So each bureau under the FTC is focused on an agency goal. And for the FTC, there are three different bureaus. There's the Bureau of Consumer Protection. That one focuses on unfair and deceptive business practices by encouraging consumers to voice their complaints, to investigate and to file lawsuits against companies if warranted. It also develops rules to maintain fair practices and educates consumers and businesses about different rights and responsibilities. Another bureau under the FTC is the Bureau of Competition. So this bureau focuses on antitrust laws, and by doing that, it supports lower prices and choice for consumer. And we'll talk about antitrust laws in depth in another chapter. The third bureau under the FTC is the Bureau of Economics. And this bureau concentrates on consumer protection investigation, rulemaking, and the economic impact of government regulations on businesses and consumers. So that's just an example of one agency and how it is structured. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the last topic in our chapter, which was the Administrative Procedure Act. So our agencies are not unrestrained in their operations. Yes, they can determine how they're set up, they can divide into bureaus, etc., but they're not unrestrained. There are due processes that are requirements that are created in our Constitution. The APA outlines those roles, the powers, and the procedures of the agencies. The rules cannot violate anyone's constitutional rights or civil liberties, and there has to be an opportunity for the public to voice its support or lack of support for a rule that an agency is coming up with. So again, that APA outlines the roles, the powers, and the procedures of the agencies. It organizes those functions into rulemaking and adjudication. All right. I've got a couple of resources for you. The first one is an A to Z index of all the US government departments and agencies. This is a pretty cool website to kind of explore a little bit to see what all of the agencies and departments are. You probably will recognize quite a few. Some of them may be new to you. So I would encourage you just jump over there, click a few buttons and check that out. The second is a pretty short video. It's like 6 minutes and 45 seconds. And it just talks a little bit more about what is an administrative law. Okay, well, that wraps up this chapter. This one was a very short chapter. So I will see you soon for chapter 11. All right, have a great day.